Hi everyone, Gabrielle Celeste here from Agua Astrology. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am a numerologist, tarot reader, intuitive astrologer, medium, and more. And in today's video, we are going to talk about the different systems that I use within my business. So this is a part two to the previous video that I just shared last week, which is 10 takeaways from my first year in business. So I thought it would be helpful to have another video where I just speak to like the practical aspect of what I'm using within my business as a spiritual practitioner and a spiritual business in general. But before we get started, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do all of the things. And it really helps me out as I'm building out this YouTube page. So I'm going to share just the systems that I use, but also kind of the mindset I was in before I started my business that led me to the realizations of what I needed to just even get started. So it's kind of twofolded from that perspective. So I am a spiritual practitioner, as I've mentioned, and my business is primarily ran online. I do in person events as well, where I just basically channel on the spot for the sitters. It's more of like a private party type setting, but the primary structure of my business is online so that I can access clients and sitters worldwide. So I knew that I was going to have an online business, and I started thinking what I would need from that perspective when the business idea had come to me during my Saturn return a few years back. So before I started my business, I had received enough intuitive readings to know how I wanted my readings to be structured and how the cadence of my readings were going to flow. And I had paid enough attention to the different platforms that the readers I had worked with were using and just my experience as a sitter. And I kind of had an idea of what I liked and what I didn't like and how I wanted it to be, those platforms to be utilized within my specific online business. So to just even get started, I knew I needed a website. I knew I needed a scheduling system, and at the very least, a brand image. So brand logos and brand photos that would coincide with that image as well as the name of the business. So Agua Astrology, it's named after my primarily water dominant birth chart, and it's also named in reverence to my ancestral lineage. Which is very intuitive, and it's gone back very many generations. And I'm also a triple water sign, meaning I have a water sun, a water moon, and a water rising birth chart. So I wanted it to feel something authentic to me. And I catered or first of all, I had the name, but I knew that like the brand image and the logo was going to flow with the name and the water aesthetic business I was building online. So I needed those four things to repeat. It was a website, scheduling system, a brand logo, and brand photo shoots, so photos. And I also knew that I was going to have to put myself out there online, because it is an online business. And the primary ways that I market my business, so the next point being how I market my business, would be primarily Instagram and now YouTube. I also have a blog that I am working on getting out, but blogging is definitely its own beast. And the reason that I like blogging, which I'm going to do a whole separate video on that, is because blogging allows for you to be found for a longer period, depending on the platform that you're linking it to. Not necessarily Instagram, but Pinterest. So again, that all involves SEO, that involves Pinterest as the search engine that it is. And I'll have another video going over my experience creating and building a blog from the practical aspect, but also from the legal aspect too, which I had to get my attorneys involved for that. So that's completely separate. So I knew I needed to market my business. and I primarily do that over Instagram and YouTube. So thank you for being here. And via Instagram, I actually don't feel like I utilize that as best as I could have in the first year because I don't think I had a really concrete idea of what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it until recently. And I also knew that. So I also have a podcast with my sister Nicole Christine. So we knew that we were going to have a separate podcast for that on Instagram, and I knew that my business was going to have its own uh, profile on Instagram as well as one that I have for myself on a personal level. So Instagram was the primary driver, and it was really just to like, how do I put this? Garner market research through these various platforms. And that's really what this whole like year has been. It's like branding, figuring it out, putting yourself out there and having that as a foundational um, like platform to market yourself. And now the next one that we're looking into for my business, for Nicole's business, and for the podcast is YouTube. So I'll share my experiences building those platforms out, probably another video as well. But with the third point I wanted to make is that social media is another way that you have to consider to market yourself. So marketing would be the third point if that's not already clear. And I wanted to keep them separate. So I have three different platforms on Instagram and profiles, as does my sister, with her business, and the podcast page that we share. And we also have that for the podcast. So because we wanted to keep everything separate, because we also believe that our energies, our personal and our business energies wanted to be their own thing, which is why they have their own profiles. And we have the podcast, which is completely separate as well. And sometimes you'll see with the whole marketing aspect, just to add this point, is that um, people that become their brand, and it's not uncommon to see this, especially with intuitive practitioners, is that they will keep their personal profile and make that their business page. Whereas for me, I always felt like my business was separate, and I wanted that separate from my own personal page because I like to keep my private and my private life separate from my business life, as well as the content that I share. I just involves members that aren't necessarily comfortable being in the mix. So that is why we have the different profiles. But I would say that those key points is like having an idea of what you're going to have for your business, how you're going to market it, and what you're putting out into the world would be just the mindset I would start getting into before you figure out how you're going to build it out, which is where the systems come into place. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So I'm sharing my perspective as a spiritual practitioner and building out a spiritual business. But I do want to add that this is different for every type of business as well. So, for example, my sister Savannah, she's an amazing, phenomenal photographer outside of San Diego. Um, she is a photographer. So her business is completely separate and different than what I'm doing. And so she'll use different platforms than I'm using. So, for example, I know a lot of photographers, herself included, use Pixie, which is how they share the photos that they've taken for their clients. Whereas, like for me, it's as simple as sharing a recorded video from the session that I've had, reading their energy or their birth chart. So I wanted to add that little asterisk there. And these systems have worked for me from the inception of my business, as well as really like the last 15 months, I've been consistently operating as an intuitive practitioner. And I've also noticed that just having like the bare minimum, and I'll share why I use them too, but having like the bare minimum this at this stage and this level of growth that I'm at and the amounts of clients that I'm seeing, this it works for me to keep the overhead low as well. So my website platform is Wix, and I went with Wix because you could get the website up within a day and it was pretty user friendly, and I learned how to build it myself via YouTube. So I was able to get the photos that I had up from my brand photography shoot pretty easily on there. I was able to add YouTube videos on there and link them very easily. And it was very convenient. For the scheduling system, which is also linked to Wix, I use Acuity Scheduling, which is linked to my PayPal. I know another option that's pretty popular and it's a free option. And mind you, there's a lot of free options out there. I pay for these systems that I'm using. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there that you can find, but I'm just sharing what I've used because of the ease of it. And I don't like to have the limitations, whether it's like the time that you can be in a session, for example, on Zoom and it cutting you off if it's the free version, right? So, anyways, I use Acuity Scheduling, and a lot of my girlfriends use Calendly within their businesses, and they seem to like that as well. And I know that there's a good free version for that. I have my PayPal, which is how I process the money online and receive the money from the sessions with my sitters. Yeah, I use PayPal and it's linked to Acuity Scheduling, and I am a big fan of it. They do take a percentage for the different transactions that you have, but depending on how you file your taxes down the road, you could probably get that back at some point. But this is not legal advice. So do your homework on that. Um, I also use Zoom. So my Zoom is linked to the Acuity Scheduling, and there are automations that you can get into. I know Zapier is really good for that. And that's actually something that I need to explore a little bit more of moving into the next phase of my business in terms of growth, but we'll get there. And I paid for as I mentioned, the paid version for Zoom because again, I don't like the limitations that Zoom places on you if it's the unpaid version in terms of the time that you have within that respective meeting that you've scheduled. I also have Flowdesk, which is for my emails and my email list because your emails belong to you. And that links very nicely as well to my Wix website and my blog that I will be coming out with hopefully soon. In order to receive the email, I use Gmail for that on the back end, and I do pay an annual fee for that. So I can have my name at my business's website.com as the email that is front facing, and it just looks more professional in my opinion. But you can totally do just like a generic, whatever your name is, at Gmail, and that works perfectly fine. In order to monitor my expenses, I don't pay for this, but um, I do have friends that use HoneyBook, which is a more automated way of monitoring your expenses, but I just use Excel to track the income, expenses, all of that mathematical money side of things that goes into a business, and it works well for me. And for my brand logo, back in the day, I used Fiverr, and I just went with someone that she ended up doing our logo for the podcast as well. But I just went with someone that had a feminine look to their artistry, and that really worked for me. And again, I use Instagram and YouTube as the platforms for the business and the podcast. And where we're at right now, we're going to be doing a little bit more of the strategy in terms of how Instagram and YouTube works from the back end, from the SEO to see what works for their algorithm to push things out. But that would be how people find us. But I'm also a 4-6 in human design. So my business is largely referral based, as this industry really is in general. So, and because I am an intuitive astrologer and I am doing astrology readings as part of my services within Agua Astrology, I do use Astro Gold, but there are free versions of out there that you can, and mostly website based, that you can plug in people's birth information. So, time, date, and place of whenever that respective person was born into the system online for free, like astro.com or astrocharts.com. And I will link whatever I can below if you're interested in any of those platforms to use. But something that I wanted to touch on before I wrap it up is the automations aspect of it. So Zapier, I believe, is a free platform that you can use to link, like, say after you've had a reading on Zoom and you have the recording and you promise that as part of your service, Zapier will figure out how to link that recording from your Zoom, and it automatically sends off an email to your respective client slash sitter with that recording, depending on what kind of automation setup you have. So that's something I don't think I spent enough time within the first year, just because like I didn't need to. But now that the next wave of growth within my business is coming in, I would say that I definitely have to look into that more, because it does make your life a little bit easier. So yeah, that's what I have for you today. In the future, I am probably going to touch on, that's the word I wanted to use, how I've built my business from this point forward, which is just like the theme of this YouTube page, but just literally from like how I got the money to build the business, because there is an investment aspect of it that you have to put up front. So you have to spend money to make money, as they say. And I would love to create a video on how to start a podcast, since I spoke to that, which, by the way, is the Spiritual Sisters podcast. So make sure to follow wherever you listen to podcasts, and just things that come up. So if you're interested in specific videos, I'm more than happy to share how I'm doing it, at least from my end in my world. So yeah, that's what I got. Alrighty. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.